This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good Erev Shabbos, Rabbi Sai, as we prepare for Parshas Boy. Shabbos Parshas Boy. Rabbi Eliezer Papo, he served as the Rav of Silistra, the Rav and Marat Tzedek of Silistra. He lived from Tav Kuf Memhei to Tav Kuf Peches, 1785 to 1828, Limis Param. Right, we have to make sure we add that after the last year. And he was recognized as a great Maggid and preacher and was most well known for his famous Sefer, the Sefer Pele Yoyetz. But he actually authored many, many Sfarim, including a little known Sefer that I happened to get my hands on, called the Sefer Elef HaMogen. And in the Sefer Elef HaMogen, in this week's Parsha, Rabbi Eliezer Papo addresses the following fundamental and very sensitive issue. In Klal Yisrael, there are two general drachim, two general paths, two general approaches to Avodas Hashem. You have people who are B'nai Yeshiva, Koilo people, dedicate day and night to learning Torah, to Tefillah. That's what they do for a profession. They dedicate themselves to full-time Limud Torah. And then on the other end, you have Balabatim, Chashuvim, you have working people who spend the majority of their day working, earning an honest living to support their families. They send their children to yeshivas. They're Mekayim all the mitzvahs in the Torah. They're Shomer Shabbos. And the question is, which path is greater? Which path is greater? This is a sensitive question. But bottom line, which path will lead a person to a higher place in the world to come? Which path will give a person more Gan Eden? Very sensitive question. And amazingly, says Rabbi Eliezer Papo, that you want to know the answer to this question, it's a pasuk in this week's Parsha. Paro tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, you think you're going to leave? No problem. You want to leave? You leave your women here. You leave the children here. You leave the animals here. L'chuna ha'gevarim ve'ivdu es Hashem ki oisa'atem avakshim. You want to go, bring sacrifices? So the men could go, just the men. Everyone else stays behind. Says Moshe Rabbeinu to Paro, no. V'gam mikneinu yelech imanu. We're even going to take our animals. Loisi shayar parsa. Ki mimenu nikach la'avodas Hashem again. We're taking every hoofed animal. We're not leaving one of them behind. Va'anachnu lo neda ma navod es Hashem ad boyenu shama. We won't even know how to serve Hashem till we get there. Seems like an innocent pasuk, an innocuous pasuk. Moshe is telling Paro, not only are we going to take our families, we're even going to take the animals. Says Rabbi Eliezer Papo in the Sefer Magen Avos, this pasuk is addressing the fundamental question, what is the greater path in life? Now I remember I heard over this verse from Reb Zev Leff when he came to Queens a number of years ago, the Rav of Moshav Matisyahu. Says the pasuk, it is quite possible that a person who spends the majority of his day working to earning a living, it is very possible for that person to take all of his work with him to Olam Haba. And everything he does the whole day, all the work he does, he could take with him to Gan Eden, and it will be considered Avodas Hashem, it will be considered a great mitzvah. V'gam mikneinu yelech imanu. Even our cows we will take with us. Even our cars, even our business, even our work. You could take your work to Olam Haba, provided you fulfill the following three conditions. Number one, Loi Tisha'er. You want V'gam mikneinu yelech imanu? Number one, Loi Tisha'er. Everything the Torah says Loi about, don't wear shatnez, don't speak Lashon Hara, don't insult people, don't steal. Whenever the Torah says Loi Tisha'er, refrain. So that's the first thing you have to make sure. There are 365 lavin in the Torah, make sure you keep them. Number two, Parsa. You break up the word Parsa into two, Paras, hey. You have to give Hashem 5, not slap him 5. You have to give him 5. Shachris mincha mariv v'higisa ba yoimam v'layla. You have to daven in shul 3 times a day. You learn in the morning a little. You learn at night a little. So number 1, make sure you keep the lavin. Number 2, parsa. You daven with the minyan 3 times a day. Make sure you learn in the morning and the night. And number 3, ki mimenu nikach la'avodas Hashem. And whatever you do, you should do it for Hashem. You go to sleep, You think you're sleeping so you could have strength to serve Hashem. You eat, you think you're eating, you have in mind you're eating l'shem shamayim. And if you fulfill these three conditions, says the Sefer Elef HaMagim, you're careful not to violate any of the lavin in the Torah. You're careful to daven with a minyan 3 times a day and to learn a little in the morning and the night. And you think what you do l'shem shamayim. Says Rabbi Lezer Papo, it is very possible this path in life will be even greater than the path of someone who learns Torah all day long. Because we don't know how to serve Hashem ad boyenu shama till we get there. In other words, which path is greater? You'll find out which path is greater. Right now, we don't know. Nobody knows. But one thing he says for sure, that is very possible, that if an individual is careful not to violate the lavin, is careful to daven with a minyan 3 times a day and learn in the morning and the night, is careful to do everything he does l'shem shamayim, we don't know which is more profitable. Says Rabbi Lezer Papo, it could be a balabas who follows these 3 conditions will have a greater shiur in olam haba than somebody who spends their whole day learning Torah. I would just like to focus on one of these conditions that Rabbi Lezer Papo mentions. The condition of Parsa, to give 5 times a day to Hashem. Specifically, we're talking about Shachris, Mincha, and Marav. Now, if you live in a community where everybody goes to shul, Shachris, Mincha, Marav, you're very fortunate because you have social pressure. You better be there for Shachris, Mincha, Marav. Otherwise, it's not going to be comfortable for you. But a person has to know that if he doesn't live in such a community, it's imperative that a Jew develops the habit of becoming what I call a shul yid. Someone who goes to shul. Someone who goes to shul for Shachris, Mincha, and Marav. And he's not talking about Shabbos. He's talking about Tuesday. He's talking about Wednesday. He's talking about Thursday. He's talking about every day of the week. And he's telling us that, look, we're all here for the same thing. We're all here to prepare for Olam Haba. Olam Hazeh is doimel leproizer b'fnei Olam Haba. We're all in this world to try to ensure that we have a big chelek in Olam Haba. That is the purpose of this world. And Rabbi Lezer Papo was telling us in the Sefer Elef HaMagim that if you want to ensure that your chelek will remain complete in Olam Haba, it's very important you develop this habit. And if you don't live in such a place where people are doing this, just think of the fact that there are thousands of Erlich Yidden all over the world. That, a person says, I'm too busy. I have my family, I have too many responsibilities. There are thousands of Yidden who have worked longer hours than you, who have bigger families than you, and they would not miss a minyan for anything. Says Rabbi Lezer Papo, it's possible you could have a bigger shiur than someone who learns all day and all night. But you have to make sure that you develop this important habit. Parsa, you want to give Hashem 5. You want to give Him 5. You walk down the street, someone said, what do you do today? I gave Hashem 5. 5? How do you do that? Shachris, Mincha, and Marav. You daven Mincha at home, you don't have Amen Yishmei Rabbah. You can't answer Amen. You can't answer Kedusha. You can't answer Kaddish. You're losing out of 90% of the tefillah. But if a person is careful, Parsa, give Hashem 5. You be careful to give Hashem 5, a high 5, right? You can give Him a high 5, not a low 5, a high 5. Then you can make sure that at Lachar Mei V'Esrim Shana, you'll have a chelek gadol, a chelek shalom ba'olam haba, harachamon hizakenu limos hamashiach, u'lechaye ha'olam haba, agun Shabbos.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.